Welcome, League members and guests. I'm Lori Rose, President of the League of Women Voters of Lake Forest, Lake Bluff area, and I'm excited to welcome you to our Fall 2020 Lake County Board Candidate Forum on Zoom. Tonight's program will be recorded. In a year when some claim that the very fabric of our democracy is under attack, the nonpartisan League of Women Voters stands firm in our commitment to empower voters and defend democracy. Our commitment to these principles is honored through the sponsorship of programs such as this forum, in the creation of the Illinois Voter Guide, a nonpartisan compilation of candidates in all Illinois races, and in our support for voter registration and education programs throughout the year. We encourage you to join us for our suffrage stroll this Saturday, a self-guided, socially distanced 5K walk or run featuring the history of suffrage in our league in Lake Forest. You can register as a walk-in and receive a nonpartisan vote mask. This event is $5 for members and $10 for non-members. We also encourage you to join our other local candidate forums for the 10th Congressional District on October 8th and our countywide races on October 11th. Both of these events will also be on Zoom. I'm very proud to note that this is our centennial year. The League has been engaging in this work for 100 years. Today's program incorporates the work of the Leagues headquartered in Lake Forest, Lake Bluff area, Highland Park, Highwood, and Deerfield. While the issues in our municipalities may vary, our leagues share the belief that the opportunity to meet and question candidates for office is of paramount importance. We've worked hard to make sure that your Zoom experience during this forum does not resemble the so-called debate that you may have watched on Tuesday. We're very fortunate to be assisted by a very experienced moderator for today's forum. In keeping with our practice, our moderator is not a Lake County resident or voter. Judy Hoffman has been a member of the League of Women Voters of Evanston for 15 years and has been active as a candidate forum moderator for most of those years. She currently serves on the Evanston board as Voter Services co-chair. Judy has worked in Lake County since 2013, serving as outreach coordinator for the Deerfield Public Library. Judy will now introduce the candidates and explain the rules of the forum for us. Thank you to Judy, the candidates, the tech hosts that you don't see behind the scenes. Judy?
Thank you, Lori, and welcome. We're going to start with some ground rules and then we'll introduce the candidates. Audience questions for the candidates were collected during registration. The League and the moderator reserve the right to review, edit, and select questions for clarity, appropriateness to the office, and to avoid duplication. As a moderator, I will choose the questions to be asked. All questions presented address issues, not individuals. The speaking order for opening statements will be in alphabetical order by last name, and candidates will rotate in answering questions. Once we begin with opening statements, the forum will run 30 minutes. Candidate statements and questions will be timed. Our timekeepers will give the candidates notice of the remaining time on each statement and the questions. If a candidate is still speaking when their time is finished, they may complete the sentence as long as it only requires a few words. Yes, it can sometimes seem a little awkward at first to be cut off, but it supports an efficient and informative forum. The forum will begin with opening statements up to 2 minutes from both candidates. Timekeepers will give notice of 1 minute remaining and 30 seconds remaining. After the opening statements, candidates will begin answering questions. They are given 1 minute to respond, and timekeepers will give notice when 15 seconds remain. Once we are done with the question and a new question is presented, candidates are not to return to address the previous question. If desired, they can address it again in their closing statement. When we have no more time for questions, candidates will be asked to make closing statements up to 2 minutes in duration, and closing statements will be in reverse order from the opening statements. I will be happy to repeat any question for the candidates, and the time clock will only begin once the candidates begin their response. And candidates have agreed to restrict themselves to answering questions posed by the moderator, and exchanges between candidates would be ruled out of order. So I'd like to ask the candidates now to join us. Very good. Very good. Thank you. Now I'll introduce our candidates and then we will begin. There are two candidates on the general election ballot for the Lake County Board 12th districts. Incumbent Mike Rummel is the Republican candidate and Paris Parekh is the Democratic candidate. Thank you for participating this evening. We will now begin with the first opening statement, which will be given by candidate Parekh. You have 2 minutes.
Thanks, Judy. I'd like to first start by thanking the League of Women Voters for hosting this event tonight. The work that you do in this community, communities across Illinois, and this country is immeasurable. So thank you. As Judy mentioned, I am Paris Parekh, and I'm the Democratic candidate for Lake County Board District 12 seat. I live in Highland Park with my wife, Shruti, and my twin 8-year-olds, Ishan and Ram. I'm also currently a West Deerfield Township trustee. I have lived or worked in this part of Southeast Lake County for 17 years. And in fact, 13 years ago this month, I met my wife in Lake Forest at Lovell's when it was on Waukegan Road. And that's why I'm running. We're incredibly fond of this community, the open spaces, the shared sense of values and community. But as much as we love living here, there's a lot that needs to get done in Lake County. And it starts with making sure that we have a bigger and better focus on the environment. There are concerns around ETO, and we need to take them very seriously and act appropriately. Also, residents and businesses have been moving out of Lake County starting in 2009 every single year. And a lot of it has to do with the property taxes that have been going up continuously for 20 years until 2018 when Sandy Hart and the Democrats put a stop to it. We also have to realize that we are in a pandemic and we need to trust the science. We need to inform our residents, provide adequate testing, and help our small businesses. And lastly, we need to act and restore the trust in local government. And I promise to do that. So thank you, Judy. Thanks, Mike, for being here tonight. I look forward to having a discussion around these issues and much more. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Rummel.
Good evening, and thank you for the League for hosting this debate. My name is Mike Rummel. I'm running for re-election for the Lake County Board District 12. I spent a lifetime serving our community. After being alderman for 4 years and mayor for 4 years, I ran for the Lake County Board. I have served as a commissioner for 8 years, 6 years as the chief financial officer of the Forest Preserve, and 2 years as finance chairman of the county. During that time, I cut the budget at the Forest Preserve from $102 million to $80 million, and during that time as Forest Preserve chairman, and then I cut the county budget while being chairman there. I have constantly worked with everyone on the board trying to bring bipartisan approach. At the county, over the past 2 years, I voted for a tax levy freeze the first year and voted for a freeze on both the levy and the new sales growth the most recent year. And in fact, I asked for more. I also sit as the treasurer of the Preservation Foundation, the non-for-profit arm of the Forest Preserve. We have embarked on an initiative to again involve citizens by creating an endowment that will make sure our forest reserves are taken care of in the future. I have put together public-private partnerships. One of those examples of a successful public-private partnership is the Middle Fork Bridge. I worked with our county businesses and Metra to create an afternoon reverse commute train so public transportation could be used to get to and from their jobs. Similarly, years earlier, I worked to create the Sunrise Express train on the East Line. As a member of Stormwater Management, I've worked to resolve flooding issues in the community, and as a member of Lake County's Partners, I worked to bring the business community together with the county to create the Farmer Corridor. Those are just a few highlights of my achievement as your representative. I have served been involved in a number of things. I've served as an alumni trustee at Northwestern University, the St. Mary's School Board. I've coached baseball and soccer and volleyball over the last 15 years at both St. Mary's and the high school. I served Northeast Illinois Council of the Boy Scouts, the Lake Forest Swim Club, Ragdale as a member of their board.
Thank you. And now we will begin the questions, and we will begin with candidate Rummel. You will have 1 minute, and you will get notice at when you have 15 seconds remaining. How do you propose to reach out to county board members of both parties to strive for compromise and therefore achieve consensus on important policy decisions?
During my 8 years as a county board member, I have worked across the aisle all the time. As chairman of the finance committee, we had Democrats on the committee. I worked with them closely. I called them, stayed in communication. I stay in communication. I worked with Chairman Frank on the finance committee. In fact, we've had 3 or 4 initiatives over the last year that we've worked on together, including the health insurance initiative, which we just passed, including the 4-pay plan, and earlier including the 4-pay plan for the taxes, which he and I both worked on together. So I believe I work across the aisle. I do communicate with everyone and try to be a person who is not looking at politics, but looking at the betterment of the county.
Thank you. I would like to make a note to our timers. The questions are 1 minute and we're going to do a reminder in 15 seconds. Thank you. And now, candidate Parek.
Thanks, Judy. Well, I appreciate this question because the reality is for too long, there's been a lot of acrimony on the county board. I see it, the community sees it, and it's been a challenge for a lot of us residents to see the level of deep division on the board that it stands there today. And I plan to act differently. I'm coming here as an advocate for the residents and the citizens and the residents of all of Lake County. And one of the first things that I would do is reach out to all my colleagues and ask them to meet with me and help me understand the experiences, their wisdom, and what they are doing to help this community. So my goal is to work across the aisle with everyone I know, Democrats and Republicans alike, and see from them how I can improve the lives of everyone in our community. And it's time that we had more people on the board that act in that manner.
Thank you. Now we'll go with the next question. We'll start with candidate Parek. What choices do you favor for covering budget shortfalls that have occurred, and what will likely continue to occur as a result of the pandemic? So
thanks, Judy. On this question, and I want to, first challenge the question a little bit, because I understand there's going to be a budget shortfall potentially, but I think what we need to do is understand how we can look at all of the different things that we're doing and make sure that we're not cutting services for things related to COVID and other important infrastructure and basic needs in our community. Now, in the event that we have to look at some tough decisions, we know that about half of our budget goes to services and half of it goes to the employees. And my goal would be to be responsibly looking at both and seeing how we can support our residents. I also believe that COVID is, as unfortunate as COVID has been, it's shown us that we can be creative. And so can we rethink, reimagine, and redeliver some of our services that perhaps we didn't think through or think about, frankly, during a pre-pandemic moment. And so I think we'll work together as a board to look at these things, but I think we also need to really think deeply and creatively about how we deliver our services.
Thank you.
Could you repeat the question? I just want to make sure I answer it directly.
Yes. Yes. What choices do you favor for covering budget shortfalls that have occurred, and what will likely continue to occur as a result of the pandemic?
There are a number of choices we have on the board. First, we need to remember that only 12% of your tax bill is the county tax bill. So 70% of our budget is employees. So you have to look at a top-down approach of the employees. We're going to start the year with a $10 million deficit, and we need to figure out how to do that. At the Forest Preserve, I cut the footprint of the Forest Preserve from 600,000 square feet of building to a little over 300,000 square feet of building. We need to look at what we're doing. We need to make sure all the buildings we have within our system are what we need to do. And we certainly don't need to increase taxes on our citizens. So we've embarked on this. We've already done some of these cuts. We've already had a sample with the fact that we had to cut salaries and cut people during COVID. We had a hiring freeze. So we need to continue to look at that because employees are our biggest part, but we cannot short services within the county. We have to provide the services.
Thank you. The next question, we will start with candidate Rummel again. What more can the county board do as a body or as individual members to support citizens' concerns about environmental hazards such as ethylene oxide, coal plant emissions, and coal ash ponds?
We need to communicate better with our citizens. Unfortunately, I don't think they get a feeling that we're listening. And so we need to put pressure on the companies that are causing this problem. This is something that the board can do. This is a state problem because the testing and all the things work through the state and through the health department. But we need, as a board, to demand those companies fix what they've done. I have personally met with Medline and said, you need to fix what you're doing. It's ridiculous to expect us to fix it. We need to put pressure on those companies to fix the problems they have put out there for us.
Thank you. Candidate Parekh.
Thanks, Judy, for this question. This is a critically important concern of many citizens or residents of our community. I have actively engaged with Stop ETO to understand the concerns and make sure that we're championing the voice of the residents that live in that community. I've attended several town halls where I did not see all of the board members present. I've been to Lake County Department town hall meetings to understand from Lake County the testing that's been occurred, and working to understand from several members of Stop ETO personally to see what we can do better. It's a real problem. I know that we're doing some testing with canisters outside of these facilities, Advantage and Medline. We need to have canisters inside those facilities as well. We need to make sure we're working with our coalition of state senators and state representatives who believe that we need to address this issue at a state level. It's not just our community. There are other communities as well being impacted. I will be a champion for their voice.
Thank you. Next question, we will start again with candidate Parekh. How do each of you plan to improve ethics and transparency in local campaign finance?
It's a great question, Judy. I have personally for many years believed that this is one of the most important issues we face in our democracy. We need to reduce the flow of money into elections. It alters the way our democracy works. And even in my race now, there are staggering flows of money coming in. In my belief, that looks like some of them are exceeding even what is allowable. It's too bad. We need to create a level playing field for all. I would start by working with our state legislators to reduce the limits on spending on local elections. Let's make sure that we're not concentrating the money and the flow of this into a few hands and making sure that everyone can run. And that's not always possible when people accumulate a lot of money, and that makes it challenging for all of us to participate. We need to change the rules and make sure everyone follows them here in Illinois.
Thank you. Candidate Rummel.
Well, this has been an interesting question since the day I've served on this board. A number of different candidates have come in with approaches that range from just doing nothing to having full-fledged races. We follow the rules of the state board, and the state, my election campaign committee was set up by the state board with their approval. So we need to put a limit on it, though. It does get ridiculously expensive to run a campaign, and I think it has people shy away from getting into the race. So I don't know how to solve that. That's, again, a state issue, not a local issue that we can solve because we're not a home rule community. So we have to follow the rules of the state. But I believe it's important that people get a chance to run, and I hope that everybody does that wishes to run.
Thank you. And candidate Rummel, now we'll start with you for the next question. What is the most important issue in the county today, and how will you address it?
I think the most important issue in the county today is taxes. We've touched on a few of those important issues with ETO, but the taxes are the number one thing I hear from residents. And how we can approach those, this has to be a two-pronged approach. We can do what we can at the county, but as I said, we're 12% of the tax bill. We really need education reform from the state, because 65 to 70% of your tax bill is from the state. We need to do a better job at our budget. We need to cut the budget. And in fact, this year, I proposed on the floor that we cut the levy instead of just freezing the levy. I was told we couldn't do it because that wasn't part of our budget process. But we need to be the most fiscally responsible we can on the county board to keep our taxes as low as they can for our residents.
Thank you. Candidate Parek.
Thanks, Judy. And this is an issue that Mike and I can agree with. Our property taxes are too high. I walk door to door, and I've been walking door to door since last year to meet personally with hundreds, if not thousands of residents at this point. And it is the number one issue that I hear when talking to folks in this community. Now, the reality is that taxes across everything are contributing to this, but particularly in the county board, taxes continued to rise every single year, even though property values were decreasing and people were leaving the community. And so you had a smaller base of people having an increasing tax burden, even though their property values were not where they were in 2008. Finally, in 2018, under Sandy Hart's leadership and Paul Frank, we finally froze taxes for the first time in a generation. If I'm on the board, I will not be voting for tax increases either.
Thank you. Candidate Parek, the next question, we start with you. Should the county board reduce the number of districts? Why or why not?
Judy, this is a great question, and I've been thinking about this myself, and here's a couple things that I think about. It'll take some time, but would love to see what we can do over time. We have 21 seats. Personally, I'd like to see them get divided into 7 districts of 3 and 1 county board chair. I am Asian American. 8% of the county is Asian American, 8% of the county is African American, 22% of the county is Latino. Yet we only have 2 African American board members in a district of 21. If we could have more voters concentrated to allow especially Latinos to be able to run, I think we would see more diversity and inclusion in our community. That will take some time to do. I think at least as a start, if we can get down to 14 seats or 15 seats with one county-wide chair, that would be great. But at a minimum, if we could get to 15, I think that's more reasonable.
Thank you. Candidate Rummel.
There's a little bit of history to this. We originally had 23 seats and we cut down to 21 seats. Do I see us in the future cutting down? Yes, I do see that. I see the eventuality of having 17 seats, but you need to remember that these county board members are representing right now about 30,000 people per district. When you start cutting seats, you start representing more people per district. And so the question is, are we serving those people, and will we get enough service to provide for those people without having a staff and without making this really a much bigger job? There's a balance. I sat on the Fair Commission to determine whether we wish to have a fair voter turnout, and the balance was argued between 17 to 19 to 21. I'm not sure where we'll end up, but could we cut a few seats out? Yes, I agree that we could. Can we go down to a minimum number? That would be tough. And we used to have a system where we just had 3 or 4 and 2 representatives in each system. Sorry.
Thank you. Candidate Rummel. Next question. What should the long-term goals for the Lake County Forest Preserves? What should be the long-term goals for the Lake County Forest Preserves? More land acquisition, more trails, more maintenance, more income producing opportunities. How many acres should the Forest Preserves manage?
Well, thank you for asking that question. As I said, I sit on the Forest Preserve Board. I sit as finance chair of the Preservation Foundation. We have just embarked on a ambitious idea to raise $30 million for an endowment to endow the forest preserve. That endowment is going to do two things. It's going to ensure for not only our kids, but our grandkids that the forest preserve will be there. Right now, we have 30,000 acres of forest preserve, and we could always add more, but part of that acreage isn't open. How do we efficiently manage the budget to get that acreage open? And by creating the endowment, you are creating another source of income that can put an income into the budget. So it is built into our budget right now that in 10 years, with the foundation, with the endowment, will be putting money into the budget to help open our forest preserves and keep our forest preserve without raising taxes.
Thank you. Candidate Parak.
Yeah, thank you, Judy, for the question. The forest preserves are the crown jewel of Lake County. I love getting out to them whenever I can with my kids. Fort Sheridan's probably our favorite. I would like to see us continue to manage our forest preserves, restore as much land as we can to wetlands to help with flood management. I do think that if we were to add more forest preserve land to our community, that we should be considering asking the voters and putting it up to them to potentially have a bond that would help pay for that. I would also ask that we look at the community at large and see where we've had historically disadvantaged communities that don't have access to the green space that frankly I enjoy. And so where can we go and help all of our residents be able to enjoy more green spaces? So I'll be looking at that lens and the lens of potentially both how we help communities as well as asking our voters to potentially look at a bond.
Thank you. Candidate Parak, next question. Due to a federal infrastructure bill, more transportation funding will be available to Lake County. What should be the priorities?
That's a great question, Judy. We are in sore need of an upgrade in our infrastructure. It's clear anytime anyone is driving in Lake County, whether it's our roads, our bridges, we need to be investing in our community. And I would say there's probably three areas that I think are most important. One is for all of the businesses that rely on having good transit, we need to be fixing our roads and making sure that we're not having any stoppages for a lot of businesses, both our rail as well as our hard surfaces. Second, it's hard for people living within the community to get to one place in the community versus another part of the community unless you rely on a car. And that's not feasible for everyone in our community. And so we should be looking into electric buses that allow greater transportation throughout our community. So those are some of the key areas that I would focus on. But it's the most important thing, I think, facing all of our residents to be able to bring more people back into our community.
Thank you. Candidate.
Could you repeat the question again? I just want to make sure I answer it directly.
Sure.
Sorry.
Oh, no. Due to a federal infrastructure bill, more transportation funding will be available to Lake County. What should be the priorities?
Well, we just got some state funding for roads and federal funding, but we have a bigger issue here. We have a backlog of what needs to be fixed. We at the county have been spending our motor fuel tax to fix things that the state was supposed to fix. And so now finally, if we get some state funds, which are still questionable, we're going to be able to fix the backlog. We're not going to be able to move to the future until we get those federal dollars in. Without 53 as an option anymore, we need to look at surface roads and how we can better effectively move the transportation system, make it electronic. The real crisis we face is in Metro. Metro is down to a 10% ridership at this point, and will they be here next spring? The way to commute people back and forth will be challenged, and with the recent challenge by Union Pacific to Metro, we may have less trains to commute with, so we need to work to make sure that Metro, Pace, and everybody gets their federal dollars. Sorry.
Thank you. That was good. Well, time flies. This is going to be our final question before we go to closing statements. And we'll start with candidate Rummel. Are there additional steps Lake County can take to help residents all over the county cope with the pandemic? Should contact tracing be increased?
Yes, is the answer. But this is a very tough question. I was just talking to Mark Fitzer, our director, this afternoon. Contact tracing is only as good as the people who are giving the answers. And we had a situation where one of our businesses was not having social distancing. And there have been a number of people who have gotten COVID out of that business. And my question was, how do we even attack this? Because if you're not telling us where you've been, and you're not telling us, and you're not tracing what's happened, this will continue. Everybody heard about Gage's Lake and a volleyball tournament that everybody got COVID from. So it's a real issue, and we are doing what we can. The money has come in to help us, but it's really up to the citizens to wear masks, wash their hands, be safe, keep social distance. If you don't do that, all the tracing in the world and all the effort we put into this will be naught, because if you don't tell us where you've been and what you've done, then we can't trace what's going on.
Thank you. Candidate Parek.
Thanks, Judy. Yes, we absolutely need to continue to invest in contact tracing, but it's bigger than that. We need to make sure that all of our residents have access to free testing. Like throughout the United States, certain communities in ours that have been historically disadvantaged have much higher rates of COVID. And we need to make sure that they have the information, all of us have the information and the ability to make sure that everyone has adequate and rapid testing. So I would ask the county to prioritize rapid testing and information for all of our residents, along with making sure that we're following the rules from the state. But also, we have many small businesses, wonderful small businesses in our community, and the county board needs to make them a priority, working with our state and federal legislators to make sure that we are keeping our small businesses well and live. We will get through this pandemic at some point, but we need to support one another.
Thank you. Now we will go to our closing statements, and the candidates will have 2 minutes. We will begin with candidate Rummel.
I want to thank the League again for hosting this event. I spent my life giving back to the community. It's been a principle my parents installed in me, and my wife and I believe that this is something we need to do. The job's not an easy one. You cannot just show up for meetings. You need to have the time to be at the meetings, which recently have lasted more than 4 hours. As a commissioner, you sit on a number of committees and several outside committees. I believe over the years, my attendance to these meetings has been important to gain an understanding of the issues in the county, not just my district. I have worked to bring resources to other areas outside my district to help everyone in the community. I do not take this job lightly. I deliver on what I say, and I do work in a bipartisan manner. Ask the former mayor of Highland Park, Mike Belsky. Ask the current mayor of North Chicago, Leon Rockingham. Ask members of the board. Over the past 18 years, I have led the fight for the 4-pay installment for real estate taxes. I fought to give back to our employees, and I've been a fiscal watchdog as I've worked hard to fulfill the vision of the endowment so our children and grandchildren can be the best possible place to live with over 30,000 acres of forest reserve. I've looked to industry to create public-private partnerships both as mayor and on the county board. I've frozen taxes where appropriate and keep fighting to freeze your taxes. I care about our community and want to see us go forward. I would hope that you would look to your body of work before you decide on who to vote for, not national politics. All politics are local. We can make a difference here. I hope you'll honor me with your vote so I can continue to be an important part of the district. And I just wanted to correct one thing. I did vote for a tax freeze several years ago, and that was the 3rd vote for a tax freeze in 6 years. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Parek, your closing statement.
Yes, thank you, Judy. I appreciate it. I'd like to thank you for having me here with the residents of our community. I've thoroughly enjoyed this evening, and I'm excited to join the board if elected come November. I promise to keep what's great about our community going, but also advocate for change. We need to get to a carbon neutral government. We need to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. We need to provide great services, but we have to stop asking our residents to continually to pay more and more. For 20 years, that was the case here, until 2018 when it stopped with our new leadership. And I'm really joining that leadership to continue to advocate for our residents. We also have to look at so many other things in our community. As we talked about tonight, COVID is a key issue. I will be out there making sure that we have adequate testing and that we are supporting our small businesses. I will also be asking all of us to look at racial injustice in our community. It's not just in the headlines. We need to do more to help our communities all across Lake County. Lastly, I'm excited to have the support of many in our community, from our Congressman Brad Schneider, our state senator and state representatives, Julie Morrison, Bob Morgan, Dan Dittich, our US Senators Tammy Duckworth, Dick Durbin, the entire West Deerfield Township leadership team, and most important to me, having the endorsement of the Sierra Club. I promise if I'm elected, I will act ethically, transparent, and be accountable to all of you and advocate for change and make sure that we all have a level playing field and that all of us residents who are not happy with the status quo have a chance to run. So thank you so much, Judy, and thanks for having me here tonight.
Thank you. This concludes our forum for the 12th district. And thank you to the candidates for taking time this evening to work with the League to inform voters on the issues and encourage participation in the electoral process. Thank you, virtual audience, for joining us this evening. For additional voter information, as Lori mentioned at the top, we invite you to visit the League of Women Voters Illinois Voter Guide. This nonpartisan portal provides essential information, and it can be found at illinoisvoterguide.org. And we're now going to take a brief break, approximately 5 minutes, to switch to set up for the 13th District Forum. Thank you.
Thank you, League. Thank you, Paris.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Judy. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Welcome, League members and guests. I'm Lori Rose, President of the League of Women Voters of the Lake Forest, Lake Bluff area, and I'm excited to welcome you to our Fall 2020 Lake County Board Candidate Forum on Zoom. Earlier this evening, we recorded the District 12 candidates, and we now proceed with District 13. Tonight's program will continue to be recorded. In a year when some claim that the very fabric of our democracy is under attack, the nonpartisan League of Women Voters stands firm in our commitment to empower voters and defend democracy. Our commitment to these principles is honored through the sponsorship of programs such as this forum and the creation of the Illinois Voter Guide, a nonpartisan compilation of candidates in all Illinois races, and in our support for voter registration and education programs throughout the year. We encourage you to join us for our suffrage stroll this Saturday, a self-guided, socially distant 5K walk or run featuring the history of suffrage and our league in Lake Forest. You can register as a walk-in and receive a nonpartisan vote mask and link to the route map starting at 8 a.m. near the fountain in Market Square. This event is $5 for members and $10 for non-members. We also encourage you to join us for our other local candidate forums for the 10th Congressional District on October 8th and for the countywide races on October 11th. Both of these events will be on Zoom. I'm very proud to note that this is our centennial year. The League has been engaging in this work for 100 years. Today's program incorporates the work of leagues headquartered in the Lake Forest, Lake Bluff area, Highwood, Highland Park, and Deerfield. While the issues in our municipalities may vary, our leagues share the belief that the opportunity to meet and question candidates for office is of paramount importance. We have worked hard to make sure that your Zoom experience during this forum does not resemble the so-called debate that you may have watched on Tuesday. We are very fortunate to be assisted by a very experienced moderator for today's forum. In keeping with our practice, our moderator is not a Lake County resident or voter. Judy Hoffman has been a member of the League of Women Voters of Evanston for 15 years, and she's been an active candidate forum moderator for most of those years. She currently serves on the Evanston board as Voter Services co-chair. Judy has worked in Lake County since 2013, serving as outreach coordinator for the Deerfield Public Library. Judy will introduce the candidates and explain the rules of the forum for us. And before I close, I'd like to thank everybody, the candidates, the leagues, and the tech hosts behind the scene who made this program possible. Thank you, Judy.
It helps to unmute. Thank you. We'll begin with the ground rules and then we'll introduce the candidates. Audience questions for the candidates were collected during the registration process, and the league and moderator reserve the right to review, edit, and select questions for clarity, appropriateness for the office, and to avoid duplication. As moderator, I will choose the questions to be asked. All questions presented address issues, not individuals. The speaking order will be in alphabetical order by last name for the opening statements, and candidates will rotate order in answering questions. Once we begin opening statements, the forum will run for 30 minutes. Candidate statements and questions will be timed, and our timekeepers will give the candidates notice of their remaining time on each statement and question. If a candidate is still speaking when the time is finished, they may complete the sentence as long as it requires only a few words. And it can seem a little awkward at first to be cut off, but it supports an efficient and informative forum. The forum will begin with opening statements up to 2 minutes from both candidates, and timekeepers will give notice of 1 minute remaining and again 30 seconds. After the opening statements, candidates will begin answering questions. They are given 1 minute to respond, and timekeepers will give notice when 15 seconds remain. Once we are done with a question and a new one is presented, candidates are not to return to a previous question. If desired, they can address it again in their closing statement. When we have no more time for questions, candidates will be asked to make closing statements up to 2 minutes in duration, and it'll be given in reverse order of the opening statements. I'll be happy, candidates, to repeat any question, and the time clock will only begin when you begin your response. Candidates have agreed to restrict themselves to answering questions posed by the moderator, and exchanges between candidates would be ruled out of order. So I'd like to ask the candidates to please join us. Reveal yourself. Welcome. I'll introduce the candidates and then we will begin. There are two candidates on the general election ballot for the Lake County Board 13th District. Incumbent Sandy Hart is the Democratic candidate. Lauren Fleming is the Republican candidate. Thank you for participating this evening.
Thank you.
We'll now begin with the first opening statement, which will be given by candidate Fleming. You have 2 minutes.
Okay. Thank you, Judy and Lori and the entire league for hosting this forum tonight. Thank you to Sandy as well for being here. My name is Lauren Fleming. I'm the Republican candidate for County Board in District 13. I'm running because I believe we've lost our way as a community and we've lost our way as a county. I was born and raised on a farm in East Texas where I learned the values of hard work and perseverance. I worked full-time nights to put myself through school as a first-generation college student. More recently, I served as Chief of Staff for the Illinois Department on Aging, where we work to ensure seniors in Illinois got to age in their homes gracefully rather than long-term care facilities. Prior to that, I was the Director of Local Government for Comptrollers Judy Bartopinka and Leslie Munger. And prior to that, I worked as a district aide for State Senator Susie Schmidt in Lake County. I'm now a small business owner, helping veterans and their families find needed support, raising money for scholarships and underprivileged children, and many other charitable causes. My grandmother always told me that if I see something needs to be done, I should step up and do it myself. So here I am asking, after COVID and the riots and the election, who do we want to be? My entire life has been dedicated to building bridges and building relationships and consensus. So when I'm elected, we're going to do 3 things. We're going to stop spending money we don't have. We're going to get back to our core mission and stop trying to be everything to everyone. And we're going to encourage real bipartisan discussion, listen to each other, respect each other, and come together. The first thing I will do is reach out to every county official, Republican and Democrat, to rebuild our sense of unity, because we deserve some courage and some consensus. I think this will restore our community pride and again, make us a force for good. So thank you for having me, and I look forward to tonight's discussion.
Thank you. Candidate Hart.
Thank you. So thank you to the League of Women Voters for this event and to the attendees. It's been a privilege to represent you on the county board for the last 8 years and to serve as chair since 2018. When I was sworn in, I pledged to listen to understand, debate respectfully, and seek common ground. We must move beyond politics and focus on what you deserve, a government that works to improve your quality of life. I promise to bring about real change, and we have. Our committee meetings are now filmed. We've overhauled our ethics ordinance. We require contractors to disclose family members who work at the county and any campaign contributions to county board members, and eliminated taxpayer-funded credit cards. I asked for the new law to allow my peers to remove me as chair if they wish to do so. It was and is important to me to be accountable to you and my colleagues. We're finally budgeting for capital needs and created a multi-year capital plan. We're AAA bond rated and saved $7 million last year by refinancing bonds. We did not increase the property tax levy for the first time in at least 20 years. You can ask our CFO, and I intend to do it again. I'm committed to protecting the health of our environment and our residents. We now fully own Oriole Grove, a critical connection between Lake Forest and Lake Bluff open lands. We're placing solar panels on county buildings. We're distributing over $120 million in federal CARES Act funds to help recover from COVID-19. And we were chosen to be among the first to get testing and receive a grant for contact tracing. We helped pay for air monitoring for ethylene oxide. I advocated for Senate Bills 1852 and 1854, now law, and I support House Bill 3888. I'll continue to fight to protect all of us from this carcinogen. Every day, our board works together in a bipartisan way for a better Lake County. It is always an honor to serve you, and I look forward to the discussion this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll now begin with the questions, and we will begin with candidate Hart. You will have 1 minute, and you will get notice at 15 seconds. How do you propose to reach out to county board members of both parties to strive for compromise and therefore achieve consensus on important policy decisions?
Well, thank you. As I just mentioned, that was something that I spoke that I would do, to debate respectfully and seek common ground, and that's what I do. And the vast majority of the items that we pass are passed unanimously. And I would urge, now that we do film all of our committee meetings and our board meeting, I would urge residents to make their own decisions about what's happening on the county board. I'm proud for the leadership that I've had over these last 2 years as chair, and actually as the last 6 years before that. So I think we already have been working in a bipartisan way. When people had elected the chair in the past, that was pretty much done on a unanimous basis until I became chair. So I would just again urge people to take a look, make their own decisions, and please know that I'm proud of how I have conducted myself as a leader on the board. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Fleming.
Yes, thank you for that question. I think this is where we're really lacking in the county, is some bipartisanship and listening to each other. Unfortunately, on the county committees, there's only one member of the minority party who holds a chair position, and that's the first time that's happened. There are no Republicans as chair or vice chair on any forest preserve committees, and committees are stacked 5-2 for the majority party. And you can watch any of the county board meetings and see the vitriol and the division there, and it's really saddening. And I think we're better than this. Certainly, I think parties should be able to nominate their own committee members. I think we should invite all viewpoints to the table in good faith and with transparency and honesty. And I think that it's important to remember that leadership and the tone the leadership sets the tone for bipartisanship. And Member Hart is correct in that she was not voted as chair unanimously for the first time ever.
Thank you. Candidate Fleming, we'll start with you for the next question. What choices do you favor for covering budget shortfalls that have occurred, and what will likely continue to occur as a result of the pandemic?
Yeah, well, it's I think we have an issue at the county that not everybody really fully understands, and that's we're rolling over a $10 million deficit from the past year. So it's true, in fact, that the board passed a flat property tax levy while increasing spending, and that's a problem, which created a deficit that's now rolled over. Yes, the budget includes capital expenditures when in the past it has not been included. But increasing budget spending is very different than a deficit. Sales tax revenues are down. So I think we have to look at some zero-based budgeting approaches going forward, an evidence-based approach where the flow of resources match the need, renegotiating contracts with vendors during a recession, making every finance committee meeting a committee of the whole so that the entire board is a part of the budgeting process, including a cost-benefit analysis that measures social benefits in monetary terms and compares it with actual costs. And you can do that with predictive analytics as well.
Thank you. Candidate Hart.
Thank you so much. So this rollover of a $10 million, that's actually not accurate. We don't allow that in our county board policies. So I understand that budgeting can be complicated, but that's actually false. So our budget is higher because we now, for the very first time, are budgeting for capital improvements, something that we have never done before, which is shocking to me that previous boards had felt that was okay. We were paying for capital using operating funds, which anybody could tell you is really an inappropriate use of your operating funds. Also, our budget is higher because we're getting more money from intergovernmental agreements. We're really pleased to have more judicial salaries paid for by the state, so that is really helping us. And then with our intergovernmental agreements we have with other government agencies and municipalities, that's helping too. And actually that's bringing down costs for our taxpayers because we can save that money when we can share services, and that's something very important to us.
Thank you. Candidate Hart, we'll start with you with the next question. What more can the county board do as a body or as individual members to support citizens' concerns about environmental hazards such as ethylene oxide, coal plant emissions, and coal ash ponds?
Thank you. So I think it's very important that we need to continue to advocate and fight to get that information back from ATSDR. We need, and I'm referring to the ethylene oxide, I believe we should have a monitor at the stack where the information from those stacks are put directly to a public site so everyone can monitor those. And the coal ash ponds that we have, mostly in Waukegan, are a huge environmental hazard. So I did attend those open houses that were held in Waukegan. There's also several Superfund sites there. So there's a lot that we need to do. And I think being involved, being knowledgeable, and fighting for the environment is where it starts. And that's something that, that this new board, I think, really prides ourselves on. We've done more for the environment in the last 2 years than I think has been done in at least the last 10. And I'm really pleased to work with great environmental leaders on our board, really making a difference on those items. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Fleming.
Yes, thank you. Well, actually, ironically, today, 1 year ago today, Sterigenics actually announced it was leaving the village of Willowbrook. And in Lake County, we have 2 facilities which are still emitting ethylene oxide above allowable levels. I've been involved in the Stop ETO group even before I announced I was running for county board. The testing data that's been included, that's been released from the health department, includes data from the facilities themselves, which seems like a conflict of interest to me. The county had an opportunity to continue testing with federal grant funds that the county refused to apply for. The current law actually doesn't impose penalties for violators. And in April of this year, data from both facilities exceeded allowable levels, and there's not been any enforcement. So in a short term, we need additional third-party independent testing at both facilities, inside and out, plus the monitoring of warehouses where off-gassing might be occurring.
Thank you. Candidate Fleming, next question to you first. How do each of you plan to improve ethics and transparency in local campaign finance?
Well, I think the key with local campaign finance, and obviously it's managed by the state through state statute. But I do think several years ago, there was a bipartisan government reform commission headed by Kathy Rigg and Judge Fred Foreman, who had actually made a lot of recommendations on government reform. And none of those recommendations have been implemented by the county, which is really unfortunate because there were a lot of people who worked on that. But I think the important thing is to look at fair maps for county redistricting. We have that coming up. And I think that makes it a little bit more fair and equitable process as it relates to campaign finance as well. I certainly think board members and board members should not accept campaign donations from those who look to do business with the county. But I think we can go even further and work with our state legislators and increase the accountability, the accountability there. So
thank you. Candidate Hart.
Thank you. I'm really pleased about the work that we've done on ethics reform in Lake County. Before our new board, we didn't even have our board members having to adhere to Lake County employee policies. And that was something that this new board really fought for and pushed through. So I'm very proud of that work. Also, filming committee meetings is something that I fought for, oh my gosh, 5 years. And so I was pleased when I became chair. We started that right away. The previous board was not in favor of that. And I think that's so important. People deserve to know how their tax dollars are being spent on their time. They shouldn't have to take a day off of work to come into the county. So that's something that I'm very proud of. And also the fact that, you know, we had executives in Lake County whose family members were getting contracts, no bid contracts. And so we put a stop to that by saying that information has to be disclosed.
Thank you. Candidate Hart, what is the most important issue in the county today and how will you address it?
Thanks. I think it's kind of hard to say what the most important thing is today because we're kind of having things on all fronts, right? So COVID-19 is an enormous concern, not just for public health, but also for our economy. Unemployment is up, small businesses are really hurting. Kids are having difficulty going back to school. So there's so much going on, and I'm really proud to have our Lake County Health Department, who has been recognized statewide, actually nationally, for the work they're doing in helping with COVID-19. So I would say that's one. Taxes certainly are very important, and I'm very proud that, again, it was the first time that we did not raise the property tax levy in at least 20 years. So I intend to do that again. And I would say flooding. We have Foxconn at the headwaters of the Des Plaines River watershed, and that's going to be a huge issue. People all over Lake County are having flooding problems that they've never had before, and I'm pleased that we got over $100 million from our state delegation. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Fleming.
Yeah, thank you. I think the biggest issue at the county right now that I see is ethics and transparency. I think the record of ethics of the county really saddens and disheartens me at this point. The county has on ethics complaints withheld notification of county board members for more than 5 months for fellow board members. I think we should be adopting a rule to hold ethics hearings within 30 days of a complaint being filed rather than 5 months. And on a transparency front, there's not been any notification to the public or to board members about things like the missed bond payment last December, when incorrect tax bills were sent to taxpayers in May, and then settling lawsuits for board members with tax dollars without notification to the public or to the board. So I think those are things we really need to seriously address.
Thank you. Candidate Fleming, next question. What should be the redistricting process for the Lake County Board next year?
Yeah, that's a good question. So that Bipartisan Government Reform Commission had lots of great recommendations. Certainly we're looking at some redistricting in 2022 with the census. I imagine that our population in Lake County will be lower than it was in 2010. So I think it's important for a fair map with the county because I don't think it's fair that political parties should be drawing district lines. Certainly not. And within the Voting Rights Act, Federal Voting Rights Act, keeping minority districts and that kind of thing. But I think it's important that it's fair. It's done based on data, that it's done by a computer. In the same way it's done in the state of Iowa, which is what makes Iowa a swing state. So there's no reason that the county couldn't adopt and implement something like that. And then looking at that Government Reform Commission's recommendations.
Thank you. Candidate Hart.
Thank you. I actually believe very strongly in fair mapping. I think that's absolutely the way to go. If you took a look at District 13, you would see it's quite an unusually shaped district going from Lake Bluff all the way out to 120 and 45. And that's because it was not done with fair mapping. It was a very partisan map. So I believe in fair mapping. And while we talk about the Government Reform Commission, I think it's important for people to know that in 2008, a study was done and then shelved because leadership at that time didn't like what it said, which said that the county board should really have about 13 seats and one countywide elected county board chair. So I have read that report. I am very interested in hearing my colleagues' viewpoints on that, but you can be sure that, that I believe in fair mapping. People should be able to choose their representative, not have their representatives choose their voters like has happened in the past with previous leadership on the county board.
Thank you. Candidate Hart. Due to a federal infrastructure bill, more transportation funding will be available to Lake County. What should be the priorities?
I think the priority has been and should continue to be east-west traffic. So really people are stuck along 120. That's a road that I travel quite frequently to go to the other end of my district. And so that's a real problem. And grade separations, that's an extremely expensive endeavor to have grade separations. And by that, I mean to separate our traffic from freight train traffic. I'm proud to work with great people like John Wasik, who has gotten a meeting together with CN Railroad. And that hasn't happened maybe ever for Lake County government. And so really proud of John Wasik's work on that, and really grateful to our state delegation, including Senator Melinda Bush, who has been working on that. So the 120 and 83 traffic area is a real problem. We also have a problem of just needing a car to get around Lake County. And so I am working with PACE as part of my role as chair to correct that.
Thank you. Candidate Fleming.
Yeah, so I think it's important. We certainly, transportation and infrastructure is extremely important to the economic vitality of the county. I do have some concerns with the capital improvement plan that's been proposed. And one is that it depends upon $87 million in bonds in the next 2 years. The county's always had a capital improvement plan, but they've used the cash revenue from the RTA tax to fund projects, which is what has helped keep the county its AAA bond rating. I don't think that it's fiscally responsible to start bonding and going into debt during a recession, especially when we've been awarded, we're looking at getting funds from the state for the capital bill that they passed just last year. I don't think we should be jeopardizing our financial standing and taking on any debt, but I certainly think there's opportunities to expand and build on our roads and bridges, and that should be a priority.
Thank you. Candidate Fleming, what can be done to mitigate flooding throughout Lake County?
Yeah, that flooding is a huge problem in Lake County. I think we have to develop new standards in defining what a 100-year flood is, and that's going to require the county to invest in mitigating flooding. Part of that is also improving the quality of stormwater runoff, certainly from construction sites, but we can also do that by investing in some green infrastructure projects, exploring shared grant opportunities, and that kind of thing.
Very good. Thank you. Candidate Hart.
Thank you. Before I answer that, I just want to say that the information Ms. Fleming offered is inaccurate, and anybody can watch our August finance meeting to learn more about the bonding and our capital plan.
Thank you.
Stormwater is a very serious issue. More and more people's properties are being negatively impacted by flooding. We already have defined new standards. So I appreciate that. We have a nationally recognized Stormwater Management Commission, and they've been hard at work on that for quite some time now. I think it's really important for people for us to continue to work not just with our partners and municipalities and other government entities, but even with homeowners and business owners to really change how they're using their landscaping. That can make an enormous difference. And then really the infrastructure that's necessary. We talked a little bit about forest preserves. Forest preserves can hold an enormous amount of water. So the more land that we have for forest preserve, the less flooding we have for homeowners. Thank you.
Candidate Hart, we're now on the last question of the forum, and then we'll go to closing statements. Last question is, are there any areas of the budget or wasteful practices that can be cut, giving taxpayers some relief?
So I'm sorry, I didn't hear the very last bit of that, please.
I'll give the whole question again.
Okay.
Are there any areas of the budget or wasteful practices that can be cut, giving taxpayers some relief?
I think there's always opportunities in our budget. So one of the things that I had brought up last year is really looking at our fleet vehicles. We have hundreds of cars. There's always a point where it makes sense to reimburse people for mileage rather than having fleet vehicles. So I think that's one area. We saved over $100,000 a year by moving the Regional Office of Education into our central permit facility. Prior to this new board, we've never reviewed all of the assets that Lake County owns. So there's an enormous opportunity there to see what we have. I would also say we need to look at utilization rates of our assets. So we have buildings, we have rooms. How are they being utilized? Are they being utilized at a level that a taxpayer would say makes sense to them? So I think there's always great ways, and we are fortunate to have extraordinary staff who look at this really on a daily basis and determine how they can save money. So thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Fleming.
Yeah, well, thank you, Judy, again. I think when you take a look at the budget in the last year, and I would encourage everybody to go to the county's website and take a look for yourself. There was an increase in the budget in 5 of the 6 expenditure categories. And there was in fact a deficit, and Member Rummel in the previous forum indicated that was the case as well. But I think it's really important to look at line by line where to cut. And I wish I could say we could do that right now, but the line by line budget is actually not available on the county's website. But like I said before, I think it's important to work with department heads, facilitating a culture of teamwork with zero-based budgeting and an evidence-based approach, doing cost-benefit analysis, and making every finance committee meeting a committee of the whole, so that the entire board is part of that process. So thank you.
Thank you. Well, now we're ready for our closing statements, and we will begin with Candidate Hart. You have 2 minutes.
Okay, thank you. First, I just want to say our budget is available on our website, and I have emailed or chatted the link to you so that you have it. It's all there, and I think it goes about 10 years back. So thank you so much to the League of Women Voters for this event. I'm so proud of everything that our board has accomplished, and we couldn't do it without our outstanding staff. Since this pandemic first hit, they've gone above and beyond delivering critical services to Lake County. Working together and staying focused on the needs of our residents is more important now than ever before. I'm honored to serve the people of Lake County. I'll continue to stay focused on holding the line on property taxes, dissolving outdated and unnecessary taxing bodies, increasing government collaboration, and keeping the protection of our environment and the health of our residents my top priority. We'll get through this difficult time, and I feel very fortunate to be part of the COVID-19 recovery. Lake County is a special place. We have over 500 miles of bike paths, over 30,000 acres of forest preserves, excellent schools, and Fortune 100 companies. My husband and I have lived in Lake County for over 20 years and are raising our 3 children here. I actively volunteer, serving on the boards of A Safe Place and Lake Bluff Open Lands. I want it to stay a healthy and wonderful place to live and work. I'm proud to have earned the support of people like you, along with organizations like the Daily Herald, the Sierra Club, and others. I will continue to work hard for you and addressing the issues that matter most to us. Feel free to call me anytime. You can reach me through my website at sandyhart13.com. Thank you so much.
Very good. Thank you. Candidate Fleming.
Yes, well, thank you, Judy and Lori and the entire league for hosting this tonight. I've truly enjoyed the discussion, and I always learn a few things, and so I just appreciate the opportunity. You know, I've spent the majority of my life and my career serving my community. That's been really important to me. And when thinking about who you're going to support in the election, I think it's important not to only consider, or even let's not think about political party or even a list of career achievements, because I think both candidates here, we're both clearly qualified for the position, and we've both had some great career achievements. But I think the decision in this election is much bigger than that. My campaign has the support of Republicans and Democrats and independents, and I'm proud of that coalition of supporters who are behind this movement. It's really encouraging to see, and that's not by accident. That's certainly by design, because I've made it my mission to reach out to the non-traditional, you know, to people who that Republicans don't traditionally reach out to, and because it's important. I think it's important to build relationships across the aisle and build bridges and consensus. So the question really is, who is the right person to restore our community and build that consensus and reach across the aisle? Is the county government that we have now what we want to continue? And I would encourage everyone to go watch, certainly go watch your county board meetings and get involved in that way, and contact your county board members and learn the real issues. But the question is the government we have now the one we want to continue? Or do we dare hope for something better? So thank you for your time. I would be honored to have your vote and your support in this election. And thanks for having us.
Thank you. And that concludes our forum for the Lake County Board 13th District. Thank you, candidates, for taking the time this evening to work with us and inform voters on issues and encourage participation in the electoral process. Thank you, audience, for joining us this evening. And for additional information on candidates and issues and where to go to vote, visit the League of Women Voters Illinois Voter Guide. This nonpartisan portal provides important election and candidate information and can be found at illinoisvoterguide.org. Thank you. Have a good evening.
Thank you so much. Good night.
Good night. Good night.